1010 WOLB Baltimore and WERQ FM HD3 Baltimore.
The views and opinions of the guest and host you hear are not necessarily those of the staff and management of Radio 1, its sponsors, or advertisers.
Welcome to the Our Legacy Matters show, where we'll discuss how to secure, maintain, and transfer wealth to future generations. I am your host, Attorney Sherry Fleming. Now let's tune in. Good morning, everyone. Welcome again to the Our Legacy Matters show. I am Sherry Fleming, and while I am a Maryland attorney, please remember that I am not your attorney, so I do encourage you to seek professional advice and assistance with regard to anything you may hear on this show today. I am completely excited. This is our second to last show of the season. I'm not excited that the season is ending, but I am excited because I actually made it through and I finished. And so please go and follow me at I am Sherry Fleming on all social. Well, I'm not on all social media platforms. I am only on LinkedIn and Instagram. Please make sure you follow my website, sherryfleming.com, specifically sherryfleming.com/Our Legacy Matters, so that you'll be able to receive updated information about season 2 that's going to come out later on this calendar year. But today, for our second to last show, I want to introduce you to another of the many hats that I wear, and that topic is specifically related to philanthropy and estate planning. I recognize that there are many people that do not realize that these two industries go hand in hand, and I happen to have a foot in both worlds. So while I am an estate planning attorney in Maryland, I am also a philanthropic consultant and hold the position specifically as plant giving officer for Bowie State University here in Maryland, which is Maryland's oldest historically Black college and university. HBCU is the acronym for those of you who may not know. And so what is philanthropy? So let's just start at a very basic definition. Philanthropy can be defined as love for humanity. That is one of the definitions that you'll learn if you study this. But it is also more specifically having the desire to promote the welfare of others through generous donation of money, of goods, of services. So donating your time, talent, and treasure is the way that I like to describe it, is being philanthropic. But when you hear of a philanthropist, a lot of us think of Mackenzie Scott, we think of Melinda Gates, Bill Gates, we think of Warren Buffett, we think of these multi-million and billionaires, Oprah Winfrey, who give considerable amounts of money to charity to support different purposes. But I want to change our idea of philanthropy, and I am going to talk about a philanthropy and in the section of estate planning. But first, I think it's important that we change what we see philanthropy to be, not just looking at the large or the big names that I just named, but looking at the individuals next door. I grew up in the South Bronx and in a community that I don't often see it anymore, a community where everyone supported everyone. I would walk from my house to the bodega. The owner of the bodega was a Puerto Rican gentleman who knew my name, who knew my family, could not do anything wrong in front of or around that bodega, corner store for some of you who may not be from the Bronx, because there was community. From that bodega, I then walked to my elementary and middle school and junior high school. I actually was K through 8th grades. And I couldn't do anything wrong because everyone in that community knew of my family. And that sense of community also is the basis for my understanding of philanthropy. People gave to one another. People gave meals to one another. We watched one another's children. My first babysitter was my mother's neighbor who loved me. And that is my idea of philanthropy, community support, community surrounding and supporting one another. That is my baseline. My grandparents and my mother were a part of fraternal and civic organizations, and they were very much involved in community service, not always having the treasure, not always having the money, but definitely having the time and the talent to put towards an endeavor. And then there was also a lot of financial contributions. Someone had to, buy the ingredients for the cakes that were going to be made for the bake sale. There was gas money spent, bus fare and train fare spent to get us to different places. So there definitely was a financial commitment. And so again, I want us to think of more than just the big name donations, but think of the communities that developed you. How did they develop you, and how did they give to you? And how are you then giving to someone else? I mentioned in one of the earlier shows, philanthropy doesn't often look like us. It's a body of research that was done by the Donors of Color Network. And it's another tool that highlights how community of color, we are very philanthropic. It's just not in the way that is typically known or acknowledged. And so in some of the research, there was a discussion and writings about how we support one another in a family unit. And I think of my grandmother, my maternal grandmother to be exact. I don't know how many people came through our family home. And I call it a family home because everyone lived there at one time. It wasn't just, your parents were raised and moved out. At some point we moved back in. And all of my first cousins at some point lived there with their parents. And we call it a family home because not only was it our biological family, I can identify and name individuals that my grandmother had a hand in raising and who resided with her, the people whom she provided shelter, food, and clothing, that were not relatives, that she had a hand in rearing. And that is a form of philanthropy that can often go unnoticed. Just taking in your loved ones, providing care to them, providing support to them, paying tuition, giving money here and there to do different things. It is the giving for the general welfare of someone other than yourself that we should consider and acknowledge to be philanthropic efforts. Okay, so I want us to expand that definition of how we see philanthropy, but also I want us to acknowledge the ways in which we are philanthropic in our lifetime, because it is very important that when we are planning for our death or disability, that we're acknowledging the places that we support in life so that we can also continue to support them in death. And that is what planned giving is. Planned giving is creating a plan to support charitable organizations through estates and trusts. So not just cash gifts from your wallet to the charity, but planning for the transfer of cash and even non-cash assets, such as a home, such as equipment, such as artwork, to charitable organizations to support their mission, to support a community of other individuals, to support students. There are a number of charities, and I'll name buckets of them in a little while. But planned giving is essentially being charitable at the time of death. Okay? And so what do you support in life? So I know there are a number of individuals who participate in faith-based organizations, particularly Christian organizations, where they tithe. Given 10% of their income to a religious organization. This is apart from offering. This is apart and separate from any other gifts. And I've asked my husband this. I'm going to bring him back on the show to provide some explanation, or maybe even some other faith leaders that I know, because I do want to know what is the guidance or the doctrine, or what does tithing look like at the time of death? Does it exist at the time of death? I don't know. I'm not the expert, but it is a question where there is the intersection of my professional world and my faith value system where I need guidance. So I'm going to see if I can have someone give us some guidance on that. But in your life, if you're given to your faith-based organization in life, consider, how would you give to that organization in death? My husband and I are members of Divine Nine sororities and fraternities. Well, of course, not all of them. I'm a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. He is a member of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated. We give in life to these organizations. We give in time, talent, and treasure. So we now have to consider, how will we give to these organizations and the principles that we uphold with these organizations in death? What does that look like? And what's important to me in talking about estate planning and philanthropy is that there is no competition between giving to these organizations, these charitable organizations in our life, competition between the charitable organization and the care that we provide for our children, our heirs. So I want to debunk this notion that there is some type of competition between wealth transfers to heirs in charity. When you work in a philanthropic space, most of you listening may not. This may be just a brand new conversation for you. But part of what you hear in the world of plan giving, again, giving to a charitable organization through your estate plan, is that people with children and people with heirs are not inclined to give to charity because they want to make sure that there is wealth that transfers to their heirs. And while that is true, it's a little difficult for me to conceptualize and fully understand, because they're given to charities and they're given to their heirs in most cases while they are living. Maybe not at the same rate. I particularly look at me and my husband. We have 2 high schoolers and an elementary schooler. Clearly, we are limited to how much we can give to charity right now because we are barely surviving life with these 3 children who eat up everything in a home. So clearly, there is a limitation. I don't want anyone to think that the sky is the limit. However, there isn't competition. I'm not going to, or having children doesn't stop me or prohibit me from giving. I don't decide that I'm not going to tithe or that I'm not going to donate to a community effort because I have other responsibilities. I just simply, maybe I'm not able to give as much, but that doesn't mean that I don't give. And so I want you to think about all of the places where you are giving in life, because I do think that there needs to be some thought, some plan, a call to action surrounding the way in which you will support these particular charities at death. And people often say, well, I don't give to charity. On my estate planning questionnaire, when someone contacts my office for estate planning services, it's a question on my questionnaire. Do you give X amount to charity per year? The reason why I ask that question is because there is an annual limit to the amount that you can give to a specific individual and or charity, individual mostly, before you actually have to report it to the IRS as a gift. And so I asked that question, and most people respond that they are not charitable. But when I begin to have a conversation with them during our consultation, they'll then say, that they're given to their niece or nephew to support a business endeavor or an entrepreneurial endeavor. And essentially, they're an investor, and that they are giving to their house of worship, and that they're giving to their fraternal organization. And then I have to ask, well, why did you say you're not charitable? And it is simply because they do not see, me included, do not have the tendency to acknowledge when we are giving our time, talent, and even our money to places, we often don't see it as charity. We often don't see it as philanthropy. So really, I don't care if you have to go through a bank statement. Look at where your funds are going. 9 times out of 10, someone is giving money to another person for a specific cause. I don't care if you're helping a friend pay a light bill, or if you're actually given to a charity for a particular reason. If you're giving dues to an organization, I find that 9 times out of 10, people are philanthropic in nature. They are giving for a specific purpose. And so if you acknowledge this to be you either now or in the near future, the question then becomes, how do you make provision to ensure that you're giving at death? Because that is what estate planning is, right? Estate planning is putting a plan into place to prepare for wealth retention and generational wealth transfer at the time of death. And we've done a lot of talking about transferring to heirs and to relatives and to loved ones, but I do want you to consider transferring to charitable organizations. I make no apologies for the fact that I do want to spend my time, talent, and treasure supporting people of color and organizations that support people of color. I make no apology for that. That is what I feel I am purposed to do. And so in that, I am self-employed. The majority of my clients are people of color. I do serve various backgrounds. I would not have the cultural competency that I do if I did not. But the majority of my clients are people of color simply because that is where my sphere of influence is. This is just like any other sales or service business. You're going to naturally get clients from your sphere of influence. And if you looked at me in a picture, you can see that I am a woman of color. And so when I am serving those individuals and I am considering, how to help them with estate planning, I often ask them, and the same question I ask myself, who else do you serve? And so I also believe in serving brown institutions that support people of color. And those institutions are specifically in this area or this time, a dispensation in my life happens to be my sorority and my husband's fraternity, and it happens to be my alma mater, Lincoln University of Pennsylvania, as well as Bowie State University. Those are the institutions that I'm currently supporting. And let me not forget my house of worship, because that's an easy one to leave off the list, because it's almost second nature for me to just tithe and give to that organization. But those are the organizations that I support. What are the organizations that you support? And so part of what my husband and I are tasked with now is saying, okay, well, what does our legacy look like with these organizations? We're in a season of our lives where we are able to put hand to the plow, meaning we're able to work. So we are giving our time and our talents more than our treasure. Why? Because our children require it right now. Our children require our treasure. So we're giving our time and talent. In the near future, it is our hope that we will begin to enhance the amount of monetary donations that we give to these specific places. And so what does that look like? How do we give monetary donations? What does plant giving look like? So right now, we're not engaged in plant giving. Right now, we're engaged in regular, typical philanthropy when you're given a cash gift. You're writing checks or you're swiping your debit card for a specific purpose with these institutions. But as our assets begin to increase, as we begin to downsize, as our children begin to age, we will begin to consider how can we support these organizations in other ways. And one way that's on the forefront of my mind is life insurance. I mentioned that my mother recently passed away, and I did have a life insurance policy for me where I was the insured. She was the beneficiary of the policy. And it was really because I am her only child. And so should something happen to me and I transitioned before her, I wanted to make sure that I did something proactively to take care of her. My husband definitely would take care of her. I have no doubt in my mind about that. But I wanted to do something that was low cost and easy. And so I had an insurance policy where she was the beneficiary of a policy where I was the insured. Well, my mother's no longer here. So what do I do with that policy? Could I transfer it to my husband, making him the beneficiary, and my children? Of course I can do that. But the fact is, we're adequately insured. We have more than enough insurance. People of color tend to be overinsured, in my opinion. And so one thing that I am considering, am I going to keep the policy or am I going to transfer it to a different type of life insurance policy where I'm naming an organization as the beneficiary? That charitable organization could be my house of worship. That charitable organization could be one of the two colleges that I mentioned. My mother was a breast cancer survivor. So the charitable organization could be a place that supports breast cancer research or breast cancer survivors. My mother was a proponent of women in education. My mother wanted women to be educated. She had a passion to ensure that parenthood, motherhood was not a barrier to academic success and professionalism. That's what she lived. That's what she breathed. Maybe there's an organization where that I can donate the policy to and maybe create a scholarship in her name, an endowment in her name. I don't know. It's actually a lot for me to think about, and it can be very overwhelming because I haven't truly accepted the fact that my mother isn't here. So I have time to think about that. But my point is, I have identified an asset that is not in competition with the wealth that I want to transfer to my children that could potentially go to a charity for a specific purpose. And so I want you to think about the same thing. I've named life insurance as an asset. There are a lot of you who are listening who are older in age, who worked hard for the home that you live in. You've paid off the mortgage. It was your dream to have home ownership and to own that home debt free. And now you're in a situation where you are recognizing that no one wants the home. So I've run into a lot of clients who do not have heirs, natural heirs. Well, let me not say natural heirs. They do not have children, nieces or nephew, anyone in another generation under them who wants their home. Meaning they don't want the responsibility of it. They don't want the care for it. They don't want to be bothered with the home. And they say, well, what am I supposed to do with this home? Do I just sell it at the time of death? Yes, that is a possibility. Another possibility is to give the real estate to charity. Give the real estate to charity, receive a charitable deduction within your estate at the time of death. and the home was put to good purpose. You can contact a particular charity to discuss whether or not they take real estate. You can work with a philanthropic consultant such as myself to really make sure that the execution of the plan or the plan is developed in a way that execution of it is seamless. But you don't have to sell that home and create a capital gains tax for yourself and create expense within your estate. You can give that home to charity, and I assure you there's a charity that would be ready and willing to receive not necessarily the house in kind or the house outright, but would receive the house to liquidate it for cash, for either an endowment in your name. There are tons of things that you can do, but giving your home, Michelle Singletary, who I believe is still a writer for the Washington Post, there was an article maybe about last year or within this year where she's documenting a conversation she had with her adult daughter. Google Michelle Singletary so you'll know the finance guru that she is, particularly for communities of color, and the proponent of wealth generation and wealth transfer. And so she states in the article how she worked so hard to have this home, to build generational wealth through real estate, because that is a large component of how it's built, and how she had a conversation with her daughter who simply said, no, thank you. Nobody wants this home. We're not living here. I'm not living here. I want to buy my own home. I want to live in a different state. I may not want to be here. I don't want to be tied down here. This is your dream, not mine. And so in the article, she's ecstatic about having a conversation and having clarity about her daughter's position. But I would take that conversation to another level. What happens with the home at this point? What happens with the home? And again, I am a proponent for supporting institutions of color, and so I say donate it. I'll say the same things for retirement plans. Retirement plans are taxed heavily at the time of death. They're taxed heavily for income when the retiree receives a distribution. There are several creative things that you can do to minimize taxation in retirement plans if you include a charitable donation in that. But you have to be and acknowledge that you are philanthropic at heart, because of my experience is that there is no tax incentive that is going to motivate many people to give to charity, because sometimes the taxes don't work out in your favor. The charitable deduction doesn't work in your favor when you have legislation that pretty much takes the guts out of the purpose of the charitable deduction. I won't go too much into that, but what you have to be philanthropic at heart, which most people I believe are. It just requires some opening of your eyes to see where you have been given naturally, and then some creative strategies to think, okay, well, what could I do now that I can enhance? And so I've named quickly today insurance as a way as a tool to give philanthropically. A hard asset of real estate, particularly if you know there is no member of your family that wants it for any particular purpose, and I'm seeing that more often than not. And I also mentioned retirement plans are a great tool, a great asset to give to charity. And it doesn't have to be in totality. It's not all or nothing. You can give partially to charity and partially to your loved ones. There is no one right way to do this, but I think a plan needs to be made to ensure that it is done. Because again, what are you doing in your life that brings meaning to your life, that is important to you enough for you to commit your time, talent, and treasure now, that you need to consider duplicating at death? That is the conversation that you need to have with yourself, with your loved ones. And if you need to, definitely consult a philanthropic advisor like myself. There are community foundations within almost every community county, maybe some counties share community foundations, but there are people who are willing to advise you, some of the most giving and knowledgeable people I have ever met, that will show you how that you can be philanthropic as well as preserve your estate assets for your family and for your loved ones. And when we're talking about what these charities are, houses of worship, institutions of education, any 501c3, you have some research institutions, hospitals in some cases, hospice centers, sports clubs. I can go down the line. Think about it. Just think about the places that you support now and continue to do so even when you transition. So this has been the second to last episode of the Our Legacy Matters show. Again, thank you for joining me. Do not forget to go to Sherry Fleming /Our Legacy Matters to submit your questions or your topics, particularly for our last show and for the next season whenever we come back. And I look forward to hearing from you soon. Have a great day. Thanks for listening to the Our Legacy Matters show. Connect with me, Attorney Sherry Fleming, at I Am Sherry Fleming on all social media platforms or at sherryfleming.com /Our Legacy Matters, or you can call us at